It does.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the June 18th Post Falls City Council meeting. As you can tell by the weather outside, this is just before summer starts. So last meeting before summer. Tonight, Rhiannon, please note that all council members are present with the exception of Councilor Westland, who is excused tonight. Under announcements, the Government Finance Officers Association has recognized the City of Post Falls with the GFOA's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our fiscal year 2023 annual budget. Congratulations to Jason, Randy, and the entire Finance Department on their hard work in achieving this honor yet again. City Hall and City Business offices will be closed tomorrow, Wednesday, June 19th, in observance of Juneteenth. Police, fire, and rescue services for life-threatening or in-progress emergencies may be reached by calling 911. The police department will be open for walk-in emergencies. For water department emergencies, call 208-773-3517. And the Parks and Recreation Department is teaming up with the police department to bring you a summertime favorite Movies in the Park series. The first movie of the summer will feature Big Hero 6 on Friday, June 28th at Hilda Kellogg Park. Excuse me. Festivities begin at 7 p.m. and the movie will start at sunset. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
There are none tonight, sir.
Any declarations of conflict? Would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is June 4th, 2024 City Council meeting minutes. Item B is payables 5/30/24 through 6/11/24. Item C is fleet division request to surplus vehicles. Item D is Ashler Ranch subdivision plat application. Item E is Montrose 17th edition construction improvement agreement. Item F is Hydrilla Estates subdivision plat application. And item G is request for proposal for a human resource consultant to perform salary survey and compensation philosophy review.
Questions on the consent calendar?
I would move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Stiglier. Aye. Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Schob.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We do have one public hearing tonight, and it's on the Tiny Home Code TA 23-2. Open the public hearing.
Evening, Mayor Jacobson, council members, Ethan Porter, one of the planners here with the city. Here to present the tiny home performance standards, the draft ordinance that you probably are aware of. Obviously, I think this has been seen multiple times. We had some workshops on it, and kind of displaying there is how basically we got to this point. It's been a piggyback of the cottage home ordinance that was approved. And so we moved into tiny homes looking at that. A lot of some direction given to kind of look at different housing options and some performance standards to allow different housing types in the city of Post Falls. So some of that will be a repeat of what you've heard or seen at the workshops, but there's some new stuff in there slightly, and I'll kind of cover those and highlight it as well. And so basically the proposal, that draft ordinance, these are some items that primarily are going to be the bulk of it is looking at basically tiny homes being on permanent foundations. So a lot of tiny homes around the country, and our research for our staff has looked at, a lot of other states around the country utilizes tiny homes on wheels. That's not the case for what this draft ordinance proposes. It's going to be permanent foundations, as building code, kind of requires that for that permanent foundation. So also the sites can include platted or common lot development, so single platted tiny homes or tiny homes on one single lot through a site plan review process. They can have garages and carports if desired. There's going to be green space, open space requirements, and then predominantly rear or side loaded homes is encouraged and required per this draft ordinance. And it promotes, a diverse look and feel kind of for tiny homes, making sure there's some diversity. You're not getting some basically same one being put row after row after row. So that's kind of the bulk and the highlights of this draft ordinance that we're proposing. Looking at tiny home and the definition, so it's pre-manufactured, stick-built, less than 800 square feet in size. So that's kind of their general definition for the tiny home through that draft ordinance. Looking at kind of where this can be implemented, the R2 zone, R3, the RM, and then the LC, also the CCM through a special use permit and development agreement, development agreement through the CCM, and then CCS and R1 zones will require a special use permit for this. And then there you can see that comprehensive future land use designation, kind of where those are highlighted. And then obviously they're not going to be allowed, as you are aware, the business industrial, which is the industrial, heavy industrial technology mix per focus area. And so that kind of outlines where you'll be able to see them, where they're going to be implemented per this draft ordinance. So some of the general design standards here we're looking at for tiny homes. These apply both to tiny homes on a single lot or they're individual platted. And so we look at garages basically being a front-loaded product. You cannot exceed the 336 square feet for the size. Or rear-loaded products, you can't exceed 500 square feet. And then we have that 66 percentage for the width of the structure. So basically that highlights basically from this point to this point of the garage, making sure that's no more than 66% of that front of tiny home. So the rest of it, that other 33%, is made up of that other entrance. So looking at some of the other general design standards, we look at porches, minimum depth of 6 feet, front-loaded products, the porch should be no less than 50 square feet in size, and then rear-loaded is 80 square feet. So to kind of give you a better idea of this, there's some renderings that our staff created to kind of help visualize and show this on a theoretical tiny home that could be built. And so this one that you see on screen, the porch is 84 square feet in size, and this is a tiny house rendering of width of 14 feet and a total size of 618 square feet. And so top right, you'll have to excuse me because I did put inches instead of feet, but that's 6 feet by 14 feet to make up that 84 square feet. And so you can kind of understand and see from that renderings, kind of the size, how that plays in, what that looks like, just to give a better understanding of, if this tiny home were to be built, it would meet our code, meet the porch requirements, but it kind of gives you a visual aspect of that front porch. So this is for a rear-loaded product, so they'd be accessing from the rear. There wouldn't be access on the front. You would just see the door and the porch in the main home there. So when they're front-loaded, where you have a garage on the front, this kind of gives you an idea. This is a porch 7 feet by 7 feet 4 inches. It's about 51 square feet in size, so it's over the 50 minimum that you would need. And then you have a garage width 12 feet 8 inches. The width of the tiny home would be 20 feet, and then that garage face is less than 63% of tiny home front. And this is a 749 square foot kind of rendering there. You can see it's 2-story, but just kind of gives you a better idea of, meeting our draft ordinance as well as showing that porch a little bit better to kind of highlight that aspect. So any questions on any of this at this point in time?
Everything that you've shown us is also available to do in the cottage homes?
Correct, yeah, and the cottage home will have, since they're bigger products, basically the size goes up a little bit, but they do, I believe, still have that porch requirement within cottage home. So again, this is just that playing the piggyback off the cottage home with just kind of smaller sizes for most of this. There are some differences, but primarily they do have porch requirements for both cottage and tiny homes. So looking at the architectural design, basically there's a list within the draft ordinance, as you've probably seen. We covered through our workshops 2 of those elements to be provided. That helps kind of break up the consistency, or the same look throughout the tiny homes being next to each other. And then we have the vinyl siding basically that can't be within 10 feet of another structure. with vinyl siding. Then we have accessory structures, basically meeting and matching the architectural style of the tiny home, making sure they're looking similar. You're not creating something too different, on the same site. There is going to be green space requirements, so 8 or more units, 550 square feet of common green space per unit, and then they providing that pet waste cleanup in those areas. There's also the 50% of common open space be centrally located, 20% of that open space to be fronted on a street, so kind of helps some visualization as well with that. We go into the maintenance of that green space. This pretty much outlines a better alternative than HOAs to just help manage that green space. This provides another avenue to do that. And so sometimes HOA is not the best option. This will provide another option as well. And looking at tiny homes on individual lots for this, they will require the 325 square feet of common green space. They need a functional yard, meet our dimensions for that as well. And so nothing new here that you haven't seen out of the workshops, but just kind of reiterate that green space. Fences being prohibited in common green space. There are exceptions in the draft ordinance. I just didn't list them here, but if you have some amenities on site, you got some courts, pickleball court or basketball or something like that, and you want to fence it out, that is allowed. But when you're looking at just fencing, just for fencing, that is prohibited outside of those amenities. Then we look at some parking, and we have the off-street parking stalls, 2 parking stalls for the single-family lots when they're on individual lots, and then when you have a kind of multifamily, you have multiple tiny homes on a common lot, it's 1.5 per unit, and then 8 or more units for a tiny home development. Basically, that fronts a green space or a street where parking is not allowed. There's an additional parking requirement for that, and that kind of helps in those clusters to provide, extra parking for the community or the development itself. It's not really for the outside use, but it's more like a family come in, you got friends coming over, there's some parking for them as well if your driveway doesn't suffice. So just kind of provides a little bit more extra for them. With parking as well, there is some on-street that was discussed to kind of being allocated towards the development. So this kind of helps offset some of those constraints, but also allows for some flexibility. So 50% of the parking spaces can be on-street as well for the required. So that does help alleviate some of those requirements as well as provide some additional parking in the public space as well. And then this is a section that Planning and Zoning, they made a comment on when it was presented to them. They wanted to restrict the developments to be, when a tiny home development comes through on a 10-acre lot, let's not have more than 5 acres contiguous tiny home use. And so that kind of, they wanted to see that in code, and so that was put in on section 6 of the general design standards, so limitations for that to not be contiguous, no more than 5 acres contiguous tiny home use. So any questions on that? Okay.
See none?
Perfect. And then we go into their single family. So we just talked about general, looking at single family platted lots for tiny homes. Again, it's encouraged for side and rear loaded. There is a 50% deviation that the zoning administrator can allow up to 50% to be front loaded. As we know, sites and infill developments can get kind of weird and wonky with some of the design layouts. So it'll help out in that regards too, to get some of the infill lots be built and allow them to have some front loaded. And then obviously they're encouraged to front a green space and then have that pedestrian connection to the adjacent sidewalk or concrete or asphalt, depending on which one it is. So lot area, minimum requirements, 2,000 square feet. Corner lots no narrower than 25. The setbacks are listed there for front and rear loaded products. Pretty much this hasn't changed either from the workshop, so nothing really new here, but this does just outline some of those requirements for the single family tiny home lots. Accessory structures, not much has changed since our workshop either on these. Basically can't exceed the height of the primary structure for the outbuildings, and then all those permitted accessory structures cannot exceed 720 square feet, and then no single structure 500 square feet. So here's kind of a rendering as well, staff put together. You can see Mullen Avenue, William Street. There's an empty lot there on the corner. Basically, this gives a visualization of how tiny homes can be put in here. There's 6 of them, so 5 along Mullen, and then one that's in the back alongside William Street. So you have 4 rear-loaded products that they access to the alleyway, and then you have 1 side load and 1 front load there on William Street. And so it kind of gives you an idea of how it fits in with the surrounding areas and the buildings, as well as what you can do for infill development and kind of what this could look like.
And so in this example, there's no community green space because they're all individually platted, or where is
Correct,
that? in
yes.
the-
So they would be having their own green space, their common yard, or their yard for each platted lot, making sure they meet those dimensions as kind of seen prior. But yes, if it was a single platted lot and then they did a tiny homes on 1 lot, yes, you would see they would have to revise this, and they probably, depending on how they laid it out, probably wouldn't be able to get 6, but just kind of depends on meeting that open space requirement.
And
So
that's 1 acre, you said?
this is, I think, less than 1 acre.
I thought it was about a third of an acre.
Can't recall. Yeah, it's less than an acre, so I can't recall. Forgive me for the sizing. I should have put it in here, but yeah, I know it is less than an acre.
Okay.
So. But that just gives you an idea, kind of how this would work, and that rendering does meet our code, our draft ordinance for tiny homes. So it does meet and kind of gives a better idea. We look at the green infrastructure as well. The only thing that's changed here from the workshop is adding some definitions for that solar collection system. Excuse me, green roofs, and then xeriscaping. There's a percentage of xeriscaping that if they utilize that option, you have to provide so much within that green space.
And I'm so sorry, I read that definition for the solar collection system. Is
Mhm.
that just describing the regular solar panels that I see on people's houses? Oh, look at you go.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's more so just to provide a definition, so then if someone comes in and goes, well, what's a solar collection system? We can point to this and say, well, here's your definition, and if their system does meet this definition, then we can utilize that as part of their green infrastructure. So it just gives a little more clarity for a definition, so we're not running around going, well, I don't know what it is, and so,
I just want to make sure that this
Yeah.
definition is like the solar panels that we regularly see, because it
Correct.
has some verbiage in there that is like primarily for on-site use. Like it's gonna convert it right there and use it right at the house, but my understanding is that that's not how those operate, right? They send it back to the grid and then you just get like a discount every month or something.
True, and this would suffice for
Okay.
solar panels, correct?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, with the way this definition is laid out, it would align with a solar panel. And yes, there are different ways that you could either connect it or hook it up, or how you collect the energy, how it's getting sold back if that's
Okay.
the case. But yes, this would, if anyone comes here for a solar panel, roof
Great.
mounted, this would suffice.
Sounds good,
Yep.
thank you.
And then green roof definition as well, just to kind of clarify that as well, to give some direction. And same thing with solar collection. Then xeriscaping, like I mentioned, if they're going to utilize this, that common green space requirement, there's only so much percentage that they need to provide to actually have that be effective and put in place.
Oh, I have another question.
Yes.
So-
Samantha, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Talk a little louder.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So one of the other options for decreasing the green space rate is the EV charging station that wasn't listed there. So
Correct.
in the single-family portion of the ordinance, it's not listed how many you need to have, but in the multifamily, it is listed how many you need to have per dwelling unit. I think it's like 1 per 25,
Yeah.
right? So how does that apply to single-family?
Yeah, that's a good question. Typically, we see the EV charging only for one. I think a residence is going to have their own hookup, probably in the garage,
Okay.
if they wanted to have some type of.
So it would be 1 per, so to get the discount in the green space, it would have to be in that dwelling, for that dwelling to get the discounted green space, right?
I think primarily it's assumed if they wanted to do that, they could.
Okay.
We are looking primarily for that, as since this is. I mean, that is a good question, because we don't have a exact quantity for that. We'd probably look at that and make that determination upon someone proposing it and see if that makes sense. Typically, we do see it more so in the multifamily aspect when they do provide a clustered parking area, maybe in front of a clubhouse. they have those units there.
Gotcha.
There are houses, though, I know a
Yeah.
couple that are being built that have their own EV charging
Correct.
station within the garage.
And I think
So
we
it'd
would
be for that
assess that
house.
with the building permit, if they submit and they're proposing that, in some type of plan, we'd have to verify that when they pull a building permit to see, are you actually providing it, and so on and so forth. Or we require that they need to put it in because they've gotten the reduction, so. That's something we'd look at. Yeah, there's no quantity with that, so I would probably be,
Like if you put one in, do you get 50,
Yeah.
you get a 50 square foot discount per unit, but you only put it in one unit?
and it is saying the minimum 25% of the lots contain green infrastructure. So we look at how many lots it's providing, if 25% of those do provide
Okay.
those EV charging, and that's shown in the building
Gotcha.
permit, we'd probably look at that saying, yep, you met that requirement. So.
Okay, I'm just a little bit concerned about this part of the ordinance when we're talking about tiny homes and making sure that we have enough green space, that we are allowing, 3 different ways to discount green space.
Mhm.
So, anyway, and,
Yeah, no, valid, so,
Okay.
thank you. Let's see, solar, green roof, the xeriscaping, and then that leads us into the multifamily tiny home performance standards. So looking at that orientation, rear side loaded, and this one is unless it's approved through a special use permit for the front loaded aspect. And so typically they can manage on a site the rear side loaded primarily. It's when you get into single platted lots that the lots can get a little weird and wonky, but for the most part, if they want to provide the front-loaded product in a multifamily, they would go through a special use permit to request that. So, and then again, they're encouraged to front the green space and then have that pedestrian connection to that concrete sidewalk or asphalt. Looking at that separation, that reverts to the building code requirement, and we have our setbacks within the multifamily common lots example or scenario here. And again, highlighting that additional 0.25 parking spaces, typically that's going to be in front of the clubhouse that we see more often than not. And so, if that's going to be help offset those family members or friends coming to visit as well, if they don't have enough space in front of their place, or parking's not allowed on the street, depending on the size. And then we go into that green infrastructure again. So this one is kind of label it out, EV charging stations, 1 station for every 25 tiny home units. That probably, that's a little more clear
Yeah.
as well for your question earlier. So, and then again, we highlight more of that xeriscaping, that's 50% to be provided. And then the collection system, again, it goes back to that definition in xeriscaping, so being already in place. We look at the access, driveways, and parking and garages. None of this has changed from the workshop, so that's still meeting those requirements and considered by the zoning administrator. And then so looking at that cottage home and tiny home kind of difference, here you can see pretty much everything just a little bit smaller with tiny homes and cottage homes, which you would expect. So sizing, square footage for the accessory structures, excuse me, the yard, the lot sizes. So this kind of gives you just an idea of the major changes between cottage home and tiny home with that. There is a limitation in the tiny home for that 5-acre contiguous within the development. The cottage home does not have that, but the tiny home does. So that's one of the main differences also. But other than that, I will entertain questions for staff that you have at this time.
Questions, Vita? Real quick question on
Yeah.
the EV charging.
Yes.
Is 1 per 25 really enough to allow a reduction in green space?
So we looked at some of the multifamily sites and the amount of dwelling units that are on there around the city and what they provide for EV charging, and that's kind of the ratio that it came out to be. And so looking at that, we just kind of carried that over for that reduction.
I know it's not that big up here yet, but
Correct.
gosh, you get in spots, where there's so many electric vehicles, and there's significantly more charging stations. So I don't know. To me, 1 per 25 just seems like not a whole lot.
And that's, electric vehicles are up and coming, and I think more people are getting them, but it's still, in my opinion, what I've seen is slow. So I think with the ratio of what we have and what's provided on some of the multifamily sites, it kind of equates in, equals out with, excuse me, with who's using, how many people are using it versus how many are available, so. That is a hard question though, because things can change pretty quick, and I think if we see that, we'll have to come back through probably a text
Okay.
amendment and revise that as needed, but I'm not anticipating that being a major thing people are gonna
I
be
can't
putting
see it
in,
either.
so,
Any other questions? So, we
May I?
would,
I'm so sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So tiny homes will be by right in R1S, R1, R2, but cottage homes are not by right in R1S or R1. Is that accurate?
R1S shouldn't be, tiny homes shouldn't be permitted in R1S outright, so it should just be R2, R3, limited commercial, and then community commercial mix with a development agreement. R1 by special use. I don't think R1S is actually permitted for tiny homes at all.
Tiny homes at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because only the R1 then you allow for a special use permit, so.
Okay. I guess my thought is that like we should allow cottage homes more freely in some of these places before we allow tiny homes more freely. That the tiny home is more of a multifamily kind of structure, and so like maybe should be allowed. Like I don't understand why it's not allowed in the text mix, like at all, even with the development agreement.
Yeah.
If we allow multifamily in the text mixed, so. I think that a lot of work went into, oh, sorry, I'm only asking questions. I was gonna make
No,
a
go
comment,
ahead.
but I'll wait for you
Go
to.
ahead,
Yeah,
okay.
okay. I think that a lot of work went into it, and I don't think that it's necessarily bad. In the ordinance, though, it does say to expand opportunities for home ownership, encourage creation of functional, usable green space, and there's just a lot in here that I feel like is gonna make these tiny homes expensive, so I don't know that they will expand home ownership exactly in the way that's meant to. And I'd like to see more cottage homes built out and utilized and see what that looks like before we start going to a product that's even smaller and different and not really by like a whole lot. So I'm not sure. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think the reality is too, the material costs will determine the home price as well, and until that comes down, then that's when we can start seeing more of the affordability. But this does provide less material for the home.
Sure.
So it is, in a sense, cheaper than a normal one, but.
Less dirt.
Correct, and less dirt and less
However-
maintenance, so.
But could we just decrease the requirements for the cottage home instead of making a whole new ordinance for something?
And you can't really get the setbacks. If you have a 1,400 square foot place on a 2,000 square foot lot, you can't get the setbacks.
But it doesn't have to be 1,400 square feet.
No, but it could be.
So you
so-
just take away the minimum requirement of the cottage home. I don't-
Tiny
okay.
home, yeah, tiny homes do allow for, because that smaller lot size, we don't really have, you have, look at the R2 and single family, I think that's 4,000 square foot for the smallest lot you
For
can
the
get for a
smallest
single
lot.
family home.
In R2.
Whereas the
okay.
cottage does 2,400 square feet, this goes a little bit lower, so it does help out with the niche of if people want to transition out of maybe, let's say, an apartment and start some of that home ownership, they can upgrade it essentially
Totally.
to a tiny home and then to wherever they need to go
I'm
after
just
that.
saying that we decided on the 2,400 square feet for a cottage home, so we
Correct.
could easily make it 2,000 square feet if we wanted to, because we made that rule, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, okay. Other people.
The interesting thing about the dirt, Joe, you mentioned that. Talked to the assessor's office the other day, and he said in this part of town,
Mhm.
lots, no matter what the size, are being assessed at 120,000,
Oh.
no matter what the size,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting. So again, you get in a smaller lot, and in theory, less dirt, you should pay less, but from the assessor standpoint, and I talked to a realtor about that today, and he said the same thing.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting. We'll see what happens with it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
any comments? So we would then need to direct staff to bring back an ordinance, is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're good with the changes, you would
Yeah.
approve it, and then it would come back at the next meeting for formal
Okay,
adoption.
well, then, like Joe said, jumping ahead, we have public comment?
No, we don't.
Close the public hearing. And you answered my question already, so. Any other comments from council?
I would just say I think it's important to keep in mind that the market's going to drive what type of home is going to be built on any particular plot of land. So the way I understand our function is just to provide guidance on the options of what we're going to allow on that plot of land. So if it doesn't make sense to pencil a cottage home compared to a tiny home, then the market's gonna drive that. But regardless, we're here to provide guidance as to what that's gonna look like, not determine what makes the most sense for the consumer.
Gives them different options. Anyone want to float a motion?
Move to approve tiny home code TA-23, was an ordinance, right?
Second.
You have to direct staff.
I got to do this.
I'm sorry.
This is the two-parter,
Continue.
right? I move to place the ordinance.
No,
No, wait.
This is just to bring back an ordinance, correct?
Oh, bring it back.
Yeah, we would bring back a final ordinance for adoption. So
I move to approve tiny home code TA-23-2 and direct staff to bring back formal ordinance at a future council meeting.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Walker,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Stigleader.
Nay.
Next item tonight is unfinished business, return ordinances and resolution. First item is adoption of the Water Reclamation Facility Planning Study.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Craig Morpole, Utilities Manager for the city. Before I get started on this tonight, I'll invite anyone watching or listening to turn off their sprinkler systems. Your lawn's irrigation needs are certainly satisfied for the next couple days at least. So that means less water we have to pump, less use of the potable water system. So yeah, feel free to do that. Moving on to tonight's topic, I'm here to discuss adoption of the Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan. This has been a year-plus effort going through planning for this. You were involved in a couple workshops throughout this effort. So tonight's kind of a culmination of all that work and bringing forth the final results of that. As we look at master planning, really what we're looking to do is answer several questions. What do we have? What do we need? When are we going to need it? And how are we going to pay for it? So working through each of these, we start with what do we have? We have an existing master plan that has guided our planning throughout the last decade plus. That master plan was done in anticipation of new, more stringent treatment requirements, and throughout that it also looked at a recycled water program to utilize land application, were some of the big takeaways from that. And as part of that plan, there was a rate structure adopted. We were facing, like I said, a lot of new treatment needs, and that rate structure reflected a lot of those new needs. What else do we have? We have existing facilities. This is kind of an overview layout of our existing water reclamation facility. This has been developed since 1983 at various times. So some of this infrastructure is past its useful life, some is approaching its useful life, some is relatively new. So really looking at each of those facilities to see what we have and how much remaining useful life it may have. We have existing flows. We took a look at historic flows, looking at that growth rate, what we've seen an increase in flows throughout the years. We have existing loads. This graph here is showing our phosphorus loading over the last about 6-7 years. This is one of many graphs in the facility plan. We look at other constituents coming into the facility, but really try and get an understanding of what we have coming into the facility. The next two, we kind of attack at about the same time. What do we need and when are we going to need it? When are we going to need it? We need to look at growth rates, and we compare several growth rates for trying to hone in on what the best one for this plan would be. The previous facility plan had a 3.5% growth rate anticipated. Our historic flows show 3.8%, so we were a little bit under what we actually saw. For some of our other planning efforts, a little bit more aggressive growth rate, make sure we're going to be prepared for any needs that we have coming up. And really for this plan, we didn't see a reason to move far away from the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization's growth rate of 4.56%. So that's what we used for this. Looking at what we're going to need, this then allows us to forecast what flows, liquid, we might be seeing, and also what loads of some of the constituents we might be seeing throughout the 20-year planning horizon. Looking at treatment, a quick breakdown. Everything that we take in to the facility stuff is leaving in two major ways. One is our liquid discharge, which goes currently to the Spokane River. We also create solids during this process, and we're currently disposing of those. There's a third-party contract that we have, and those are beneficially reused for soil amendments by our third-party contracted entity. So trying to plan for both of those facility needs, for liquid and for solids. Looking at the solids, we evaluated several alternatives. The preferred alternative, or the recommended alternative in the study, is to continue our contract disposal with Bartek. That represents our lowest net present worth cost alternative, which is also a good thing. And to supplement that, adding some thickening stages to our facility to increase the percent solids, reduce the volume that we have to deal with in that process. Pretty, I don't want to say straightforward, but pretty easy to understand recommended alternative there. On the liquid stream, recommended alternative is to conduct improvements to the water reclamation facility per our needs analysis that was developed, and also to continue with the recycled watering program as envisioned in that 2013 facility plan. So coming back to this flow and load projection graph or table really quick, the flows you can see going up, and we aren't really capped on our discharge to the Spokane River of liquid, but one thing that we are capped on is our discharge in pounds per day of total phosphorus. So on the, we'll use the mouse here. So this lower one shows our average loading for phosphorus. And you can see this number growing. 205 is right now. We're forecasting about 500 pounds per day average total phosphorus coming into the facility. Our permit allows 3.19 pounds per day total discharge, total phosphorus discharge. So we may reach a point where we're at the technological limit of what we can remove for total phosphorus, and we need to look somewhere else for where to discharge that water. And that's where that recycled water program comes in. So the recycled water program is an alternative to Spokane River discharge. It's looking at land application, and it also provides maximum future flexibility if a different constituent comes up, which may further limit our ability to discharge to the Spokane River. So this map here, the areas outlined in red, show some of our existing land that we have planned for land application. The community forest is one area, and then the city owns property on the prairie. So continuing that 2013 plan, we'll be looking for additional opportunities for land application. This may include additional land purchase or land application to rights-of-way or interstate frontage. Other areas might be golf courses if we see a high demand, or an industry that comes in and needs a source of water as well. So that 2013 program, we've been adding to our holdings to be ready for that, but continuing that 2013 program would, going too far, would allow for completely eliminating our discharge to the Spokane River in the summer if need be. So that's that recommended alternative for that liquid stream of facility needs. So not readable here, but getting back to the when are we going to need it, this shows when anticipated existing facilities may reach their end of usable life or may be capped out on their treatment capacity. We need to add to that portion of the facility. So really honing in on what we need and when we're going to need it. So in knowing what we need and when we're going to need it, we build a capital improvement plan that lays out what it may cost for those items for the improvements. And this plan is showing for that solid stream about $24 million, $24.3 million in capital improvements, and the liquid stream projects about $267.3 million. Sorry. So for the water reclamation facility, we're looking at about $291 million of improvements over the next 20 years. We can look at where those facilities are going to be built. So this is a similar overview to the one that you saw earlier. And you see new facilities being constructed in areas where we don't have much right now. So we do have a good footprint that allows for these new facilities to be built when they're needed to become online. So this is kind of an estimate or forecast of where items may be in 2042 for the facility. Last question, how are we going to pay for it? Very important question. So as part of this, our engineering consultant hired a financial subconsultant that developed a financial plan and a rate forecast for all of these items. So we took the capital improvement plan from the water reclamation facility. We, in 2019, completed a similar master planning effort for the collection system. So we have the capital needs from that collection system and develop a financial plan to be able to pay for all of the improvements on both systems. Some takeaways from that. The capital improvement plan in this facility plan, all of the projects were listed in 2023 dollars. So the financial plan then takes that and assigns an inflationary adjustment to account for operation, maintenance, construction costs of when those items are going to be needed, so that we're building the funds to be ready and know what the dollars are going to be when those projects come up. It also estimates depreciation of existing assets. We use that to build a replacement fund. So the replacement fund, when existing facilities need to be taken offline and replaced and new built, we're going to have funding available to build those. And it forecasts user rates for the planning period. And those user rates are really what's paying for that operation, maintenance, construction of replacement facilities, really paying to maintain the facilities that we have. A different fee that's also estimated in the financial plan are capacity fees. The capacity fees are how we currently fund projects related to growth. So when a new connection comes into the system, they pay that capacity fee that's buying into their ability to be connected into the system. So capacity fees are separate from the user rates, but both are forecast in this financial plan. An important piece of that capacity fee analysis is it goes hand in hand with those growth projections. We'll be doing check-ins on that financial plan every 2 to 5 years to see if what was forecast is about where we need to be or what the growth that we're seeing. So if we're a little bit more aggressive, if we've seen more aggressive growth, we can adjust our timing to get those projects online sooner. If we're not seeing the growth that we anticipated, we're also not going to be seeing the capacity fees come in as anticipated, and we can push off the expansion of some of those facilities because we're not going to need them. We haven't seen the growth. So we'll be doing those check-ins on the throughout this planning horizon to make sure we're getting those facilities online when we need them. This harkens back to the 2013 facility plan. For those who have been here this long, you can see those percent rate increases early on, which set us up to be able to bring the new technology online. The tail end of that plan forecast 2.5% rate increases, annual rate increases from 2023 onward. As part of this financial plan, that was evaluated again, and with all the recommended alternatives, that remains the recommendation, about a 2.5% annual rate increase. So we won't hopefully be seeing those 14% rate increases that we did. We've done the hard work, the heavy lifting. So this kind of shows that cumulative rate increase over the next 20 years and what the subsequent monthly rate would be for the average user. So we started off with big questions. What do we have? What do we need? When do we need it? And how are we going to pay for it? And through all this effort, we know what we have. We know what we need. We know when we need it. And I'll caveat that we have forecast when we need it. But we'll be checking in to see if we're on line with the growth and adjusting as necessary. And we have a plan to pay for it. I wanted to give some acknowledgments for people who had a big impact on development of this. Adam Tate is our chief operator, Randy Bain, accounting supervisor, John Beecham, our public works director. Our consultants, JUB engineers, and Mike Kahn led that effort, and their financial subconsultant, the FCS group, and Anzi Sanchez-Vernoche led that effort for them, as well as you guys as well. You, like I said, and were involved in workshops throughout the process and read the documents, asked questions, appreciate all of that. So that's where I'll leave off and we can talk about it.
Make a comment, Craig. I was here when we started that back in 13. We had to go with 14% increases, and those were some painful increases. And I'm pleased to see that it's down to that 2.5, and you're confident that can be the rate as we move forward. Eliminates those double-digit increases that we saw for many years. So, and I'm going to be perfectly honest. I did not read all 900 and some pages, but I thought you provided a good summary and it's good information. Comments?
So I did email you, and I know you emailed me back, and then I didn't email you back, so I'm sorry. But, so it's like 2.9 million over 20 years, and is that what we're looking for to fund what you had presented?
So the total capital improvements were 291 million over
Okay.
the 20 years.
Sure.
So the 2.9, I was curious where,
Oh, I must have just thought that it was a comma and not a point.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
in that, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so then when you get to the $96 in
Mhm.
like 2043, is that based on the number of users that we have today or projected number of users that we will have in 2043? Since that money that is, I'm assuming that that need is distributed across the amount of heads paying to get to that number, yes?
it is. So it doesn't rely, it accounts for the number of users that are anticipated to be
Okay.
online at that
Yep, that's my question.
2042.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I would
No,
move-
I move to adopt the water reclamation facility planning study.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Motion passes, thanks. And Craig, you forgot to mention yourself in there, so thank you for all your work on that as well. Camillin Well Rehabilitation Consulting Services, Additional Services Authorization. Wow,
I know, nice long title.
that was.
Brian Myers, Parks Manager for the City of Post Falls. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me tonight. Here to discuss an additional services authorization for the well replacement down at Camillin Park. So you may remember about 18 months ago, I was standing before you for the initial consulting services agreement with, at that point, TO Engineers, now Ardura. The original well down at Camillin was installed in 1975. It's been in service to the community since that time. And it's owned by the City of Post Falls. Craig Borenpool and his team help with the administration of that and testing of the well and such. But ultimately, it's Parks Department's responsibility to manage that. It's not part of the ratepayers' facilities to manage and continue to operate. So that's why I'm here, and Craig is not. So the other reality of that is the system is regulated by DEQ as a public drinking water system. So that puts some other thresholds for us as far as performance and operations maintenance. It's not just like a well that would be at a private resident and the requirements that would be situated with that. So part of that, DEQ comes out and does surveys from time to time to monitor the facility. And in 2022, they identified some issues with our well and our system that needed to be addressed. One of those were the well casing itself and rust that's starting to show. They believe this was a result of a cap that was placed over the well since it was installed that didn't have venting, and basically that created condensation against this steel casing, and rust formed on that casing. As a part of this initial survey that we had with our initial contract, TO worked with a on-site field consultant, and we believe we can just remove up to 10 feet of that casing, weld a new piece of casing on, and not have to relocate the well. If we had to go down that other road of relocating the well, it would be a different process. So as a result of that discussion and working with DEQ in that providing that recommendation, it ended up saving us almost $10,000, or a little over $10,000 on that initial consulting services agreement. The other issue that was found is with the well house itself. It's a CMU block wall foundation that's subsurface, and that block wall foundation is starting to show some settling cracks. And part of the requirements for that is the well houses have to be protected from flooding, and with a foundation that's cracked, that's hard to do. So you can see here pictures from the interior. You can see water staining on that block wall foundation. We definitely have water intrusion that comes from surface water, irrigation, rainwater, that sort of thing. It does infiltrate down into this well house. So some other things that if we had gone down the road of not being able to replace that well casing, we would have moved into this rule requirement of having a well that was further than 50 feet from roadways. And that would have forced us to find a different spot in the park that's away from all of those facilities, any stormwater facilities. And it's rather difficult to do that. Most everywhere in this park is either nearby the river and has potential groundwater influence, or it's stormwater treatment for our parking lot or roadways surrounding, or it treats our septic system. So that we're pretty limited on where we could locate a well at Camila Park. So thankfully, as far as we know now, the approach we're taking is going to prevent the requirement to reconstruct a well somewhere else. Just some administrative points that will be addressed with the reconfiguration of a well. We'll end up with an O&M manual. In 1979, that wasn't a requirement, and it was constructed, and nothing was handed over to the city to have an O&M manual, and it's just been managed through experience and staff passing on information from year to year. We'll have that in documentation going forward. So next steps, this was a slide that was in that presentation 18 months ago. We hit the yes, so that's the cheaper alternative, thankfully. And now I'm here to request the consulting services, additional services agreement in the sum of $62,290.32 to get construction drawings. As a part of that, we're going to be having to draft a public drinking water facility master plan for the park as a kind of a hurdle step prior to designing the wellhead facility or the well pump house facility. Just a DEQ procedural step that I'll be back and reporting on that at some point, kind of a midpoint of this CD drawings set. So with that, stand for any questions.
Questions, Brian? Don't think we have a choice.
No, we don't.
And I think this is a lot better than having to relocate.
I'd move to approve the Camila Well Rehabilitation Consulting Services Additional Services Authorization.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Jove. Aye. Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thanks. Thanks, Brian. Next item up is the Spokane Street Rehabilitation Cooperative Agreement with Idaho Transportation Department.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager. In early May, I presented on a project update for the Spokane Street project. At that time, I had mentioned that the city was working with the Idaho Transportation Department on a proposal and a request we received to add or extend the paving limits of the Spokane Street project. This presentation this evening is the next steps in that process. This presentation also includes item 3C and 3D on the agenda tonight. So under unfinished business, I combined both of those as they're related to the additional paving. So the original project limits encompass what you see on the screen, generally the north end of the Spokane River Bridge to the eastbound ramps on I-90. This project is funded through a grant that the city received. Following our bidding, ITD reached out to city staff and was interested in adding the additional paving, extending the limits north. This would continue north from the eastbound ramps to Southeast Way. This area of street is actually within ITD's jurisdiction, so they are the responsible entity for maintenance. They recognize that the pavement is in poor condition and saw our project, the city's project, as an opportunity and a vehicle to accomplish some of that maintenance work now. This is a benefit to both the city and the ITD if we were to move forward. ITD has indicated that if we did not include it at this time, they would plan to include it as part of a larger paving project in the future. The specifics of the agreement, so 2 items. The first is the ITD Cooperative Agreement, which stipulates a lump sum payment to the city of Post Falls. This would be an amount of $700,000 and is envisioned to provide funding needed for project costs, the design, construction management services, as well as the actual construction costs. The second item is with Welch Comer, the city's engineer consultant for the project. This provides the design and construction management services needed, and this is in the amount of $90,000. This amount would be paid or funded out of the $700,000, with the remaining of that balance would go towards the actual construction costs to be negotiated with the contractor. Additional note, in the agreement, we do have some language that provides the city the ability to invoice ITD should the project costs exceed the $700,000. Next steps, following a design with our design consultant, we would negotiate a change order with the contractor, a final review with ITD and approval from ITD, and then envision coming back to council.
Question really quick.
Yes.
You said there's provisions that would allow the city to invoice ITD if those costs exceed $700,000. Does it also obligate them to pay those invoices?
Yes,
Okay.
so in talking with ITD, they recognize that this is a benefit to ITD as well as the city. And part of this final step in checking, a check-in, if you will, with ITD following a negotiated change order from the contractor allows for that final review of what actual project costs are anticipated to be. So currently that placeholder is $700,000. I imagine if we vary much off of that, that would continue discussions with ITD if they want to move forward, and that would provide an indication of time. So maybe that's a long way to say there'd be enough confidence in knowing what we were committing to at the time for unanticipated expenses, typically a contingency amount. That is what's intended to be addressed through additional costs that we would then seek reimbursement from ITD. And they have indicated they would provide reimbursement and funding for any project-related costs. Did I answer?
Yeah, I just want to make sure
question?
that we're made whole.
Okay.
There's not some sneaky, we can invoice them from them, but we'll have to chase them for payment.
There's also a non-appropriation clause in the contract as well, so
Okay.
they could just not appropriate it.
Thank you, Field, for the for that add. Overall project timeline, I've presented on this a few times, the Spokane Street project, and providing updates over the last 6 months. We have the Spokane Street project right in the middle, the original cities project. To the south is the Post Falls Highway District Bridge project, currently under construction. And then north would be the ITD additional paving that would be combined into the Spokane Street project. Time frame, we are looking to start this in July. Earliest would be July 15th. Anticipate getting an updated time frame this week or next on a start date. And then recent indication from Post Falls Highway District is that that project is going well and more or less on or ahead of schedule. So more updates anticipated soon. With that, I would stand for any questions.
I'd just like to say it's significantly easier to approve stuff when it's not coming out of the city's budget. So I think it makes a lot of sense. We're talking earlier, Spokane Street right now is a mess just because of the bridge work, and it's going to even be worse. But we have to live through it until October, and I think that we'll be able to reap the benefits of that, so.
Yeah, I spoke with Marvin Finn at ITD, and he was very appreciative of the city's willingness to consider this, adding this into the project, and really appreciates not just the coordination here, but throughout the city and projects, working with the city and ITD and other various staff. So.
And it's nice to get it done now instead of having to wait for a future date, so. Any comments?
That's what I'd say. As long as we're made whole, for the love of God, let's get it over with.
And you want two Motions are, do you want to take them together?
If you can take, you can take them together. So, or we can take them separately. I know they're long.
C and D.
C and D together, okay. I would move to approve the Spokane Street Rehabilitation Cooperative Agreement with the Idaho Transportation Department and the Engineering Services Contract Amendment.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Shove. Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Last item up under unfinished business is Landmark Place Annexation Ordinance File. Annex 23-2019.
I move to approve the Landmark Place Annexation Ordinance File number ANX 23-2019.
And
Oh, and,
The two-part-
geez,
this is the two-part one.
sorry.
two-part one. It's there.
I was waiting for a presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, okay, and move to place the ordinance on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules. Yes.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Motion passes.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, annexing parcels 50N 05W 043975 and a portion of 50N 05W 044425, consisting of approximately 11.148 acres located in the northwest quarter of Section 4, Township 50 North, Range 5 West, Boise Meridian, Kootenai County, Idaho, and zoning the annexed property as low-density, single-family residential R1, providing for the amendment to the official zoning act map and providing for an effective date hereof.
Samantha, you want to run with that one?
I move to approve the ordinance and direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item up is new business, 2 items. First, accounts receivables write-offs.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Now that we are finished with the, sorry, didn't do anything with that. Now that we are finished with this year's audit, it's time to look at closing some of this down. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right, sorry about that. It's reviewing some of the items that we need to clear up for our next audit, which is coming up. Sadly, year end is coming up at the September 30th. But we have some accounts receivable items that are old, and some of these items that we have invoiced for, we didn't receive them against the accounts receivable item, we just received them into the general ledger. So when it comes time for audit reports, they like to see that anything that was billed, that anything that was written off by the finance department has went through the legislative body for approval. So here I am asking for approval to write these off. The first one is a business license that was from 2017. We had some miscellaneous AR from 2009. Parks had some fees for unpaid sports field usage. PD, we had billed for some license plate recognition database that they're no longer using those agreements. And sewer cap fee, we have collected that money and it just wasn't applied against any of the accounts receivable that we had listed. And also with the water tower rent, that was also received but not applied against accounts receivable. So I've listed the breakdown on the list, and so I just need authorization from council to do so.
When we're looking at them, it was,
14,000 change.
yeah, it's not a big number, and from years ago, some of them were received, so.
Yeah, they were.
Again, I thought this was pretty painless. You know, you
It
always
is.
hate to write anything off, but
Right.
these amounts were not bad, so I think
Yeah,
that's.
we're usually pretty
kudos.
good about collecting items, but
Kudos
these
to
are just.
staff for that.
Yeah. Okay.
I would move to approve the accounts receivable write-offs as presented.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Thank you, Jason. Next item up is the aggressive solicitation ordinance.
This is a relatively simple item, but I thought it would be helpful to see the previous code section. So this was brought to our attention by a police officer in citing one of these codes. Basically, the state code had changed and moved one number, so this came to us to literally just change a 5 to a 4, but in doing so, so we needed to update this again from 5 to a 4, but in doing so and looking at it, some of the language just was a little clunky because the prohibition where it says it shall be unlawful for any person to sit or stand on a highway reads like we're prohibiting sitting and standing on a highway when really we're prohibiting the soliciting traffic and such on the highway. And so we did just a basic rewrite to just say it shall be unlawful for any person to solicit business or contributions from the occupants of a vehicle on the highway. Again, changing it to update the number from 5 to 4 and adding or its successor so that if the state code changes again, we don't have to go through this. So, any questions? And one other final note, this is a fairly straightforward matter. I think we could probably just go ahead with adoption of the ordinance tonight rather than bringing it back for formal adoption. Any questions?
I was hoping you could present that more aggressively.
Yeah.
I thought you had to present.
Come on.
It had to be
Sit there,
aggressive.
Or stand there and.
I move to place the ordinance, aggressive solicitation ordinance. I don't have the number. Does that matter?
They'll add it.
Yeah.
On its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Which passes. Phil.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, Kootenai County, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, repealing and replacing section 9.20.010A relating to solicitation, providing that the remaining sections of Post Falls City Code shall remain in effect, providing for severability, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law.
I still feel like that was too placid, but I move to approve the ordinance and aggressive solicitation ordinance and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next section of the agenda is citizens' issues, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding city-related issues that are not on the agenda. Please, name for the record, and you've got a timer down here on the desk in front.
Thank you, Mayor Jacobson, City Council members. My name is Peter. I'm a resident in Post Falls. My concern kind of matches with the ordinance for the tiny homes. I'm just wondering, it's no surprise about the amount of building that's going on. The Planning and Zoning Commission just approved the Northwest subdivision. And, you know, we have more subdivisions coming up. And I was just wondering if maybe it's time to look into hiring more city inspectors to make sure that these home builders are adhering to building codes that the state adopted. We can't really make stricter building codes because Idaho has a law that all towns and counties must use the same building code. So we can't like adopt stricter building codes, but we can be stricter into making sure that builders are adhering to the codes that the state has adopted. And me and my wife, we bought a new build almost a year ago, and we're happy with the home. And you know, luckily, there's no major problems. We did have a private inspection, as all of our neighbors did, and some small things came up. And the builder, luckily, you know, they're taking up on themselves to fix it. They're standing behind their work. But when they send subs out to like repair what was found, it always comes up to like, well, the sub they send out is not the original that did the work. They're down the street building a new home. So they send a new sub, and it kind of comes out like, I'm surprised the city inspector didn't flag this or they allowed this to go through. And I hear the same from other neighbors. And I don't think we should really leave it on to private inspections to catch these things because, you know, there's like a consensus with new builds that, oh, you don't always need a home inspection. Realtors might push that on people that's moving here. It's a new build, it's perfect, there's no problems. You don't need to get it inspected. So I guess my main concern is maybe we should look into hiring more inspectors. Maybe their workload is, you know, getting compounded, I believe it, with the amount that's going on. And that's it.
Let me comment on that if I may. Appreciate your concern in bringing it forward. From personal experience, our city inspectors are tough.
Oh, no,
They are
do
tough,
believe-
and they do a good job. And again, I know because we've dealt with them. They're not out of line, but they require things done right. I know they're going out on every project. We're cautious. We're in the middle of a budget process, and, you know, it's one of those things that's always taken into consideration where we are staff level and workload level. But eventually, we probably will need to hire additional staff. But I do want you to know that from what I've seen, the staff we have right now is doing a very good job catching things that I would never have imagined. And these are from builders who build, and, you know, they'll be a quarter of an inch off or an eighth of an inch off. So they're pretty picky, and they're doing it, I think, they're adhering to code and making sure that things are built appropriately. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and I think it's something that as we move forward in the budget process and look at staffing levels, I'm sure we'll take into consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking your time.
Thank you.
May I ask a question based on that comment? Do we have a process within the city where if a resident has had an inspection or done a permit and something is still found, that they can submit that to the city and say, hey, I got my permit passed, but this was another finding that came from a private inspection. I just would like the city to
Don't see
know
anybody
about it?
from,
So I can answer that
Okay,
question.
Ben.
We do on occasion, a lot of times what happens is in the resale of a home, some of this will come up, and that information is turned over to community development and reviewed by our building inspectors to see what happened and why something might have been approved that
Gotcha.
should have been caught, or if there was something with the plans that didn't match up with what was actually built.
Okay.
I wouldn't say we have a formal process on it, but we do on occasion get that feedback from
Gotcha.
someone, like I said, tends to be not from inspections like what he's referring to, but more from realtors reaching out to us to say this happened when they went to go purchase a home.
Well, if you have more people that are moving into your neighborhood that have similar
Yeah,
experiences,
we'd encourage
please,
them to give
yeah,
us a
feel
call.
free to reach out.
I did reach out to Rob Strobel, one of the city
Okay.
inspectors, regarding some things, and he's been a lot of help. But it's also come to, like, you know, go to your builder first, and if they give you any pushback, then come to me, and I'll make sure that they're doing the right thing. And I guess it kind of comes to, like, well, why is it on the homeowner to, like,
when you're buying a product, you want it to be built properly.
exactly,
Yep.
you want it to be built
Yeah.
properly, you know, and you want to put trust in that the steps are being followed, the builder is adhering to code, and the inspectors are going out and looking at it. And, you know, of course, it's easier to find it before a house is sold because it's also going to be a pain on the homeowner. It might be a big job, you don't know. You know, if drywall has to come off, framing has to come off because one thing was missed. And then they're like,
Well, they do a good job. They're human. They can make mistakes, but they
Of
do a
course,
good job,
of
so.
course.
But
I'll
again,
get with our building official tomorrow and
Yep.
talk with him.
Sounds good. Thanks for bringing that forward.
thank you, appreciate it.
Next item up is Black Bay construction update.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Robbie Quinn, Parks Planner, and I'm here to kind of go through an update on our Black Bay project. I do have quite a few slides, but they're mostly just pictures, so it should go fairly quick. So kind of just reviewing what was in our phase one scope, and that's kind of highlighted in this red box over here. So generally just kind of moving south. We are installing a new arrival plaza and shelter right about this area, right off the parking lot. And then from there, we're looking at regrading the hillside and the lawn area for to remedy some of our drainage issues. And then kind of on the way down to the beach, or the nose of the bay, we'll be regrading that trail to meet ADA standards. That will come with some upgrades to the beach area as far as hardscaping, erosion control, and then the boardwalk construction. And then just in general, a few erosion control throughout the bay itself. So I'll kind of go over what we've completed already, what they're currently working on, our future schedule, and then a few of the delays we've encountered along the way. So to start out with, kind of what they first tackled was the erosion control. So these are a few before pictures on the north end of the bay. You can see quite a bit of washout, a lot of tree roots exposed. And again, just a few more images kind of working down. So quite extensive along a large portion of that north end. And so some of the treatment that they was designed for this was what we're calling kind of a dirty riprap. So it's a range of rock sizes from 2 to 6 inches mixed in with soil. And so that soil would ultimately be planted. It's kind of hard to see, but there's hundreds of little tree willow stakes that are planted throughout here. So the idea is those grow, the roots kind of grab onto all the soil, and mixed with the rock kind of prevents future erosion in that area. So the next section is along this large bend of our path here. So you can see kind of how steep it drops off, some of the trail getting pretty narrow through this area where we've seen it slough off. Again, kind of an image down by the water's edge of how steep that is. Some of the trees falling over. Same thing here. Right here, this is an attempt to some remediation in the past that we've done that is also failing. You can see it's kind of leaning over and where the trail's falling apart. So this was one of the major kind of renovation areas on the site. So essentially what we ended up doing is putting in a naturalized kind of retaining wall mixed with riprap and MSE wall structure. And so this is when they're doing the demo, the water's at the lowest level, and they're starting to excavate to prepare for that wall. And this is it fully excavated. They started to put back the base riprap where the wall will be built upon. And you can kind of see, so up here is where the trail was. So they're down at the highest point about 18 feet. And the reason for that is the geogrid, which I have a picture of right here. So you can see they're starting to build the wall that'll get stacked kind of along this whole route. And then the reason they had to excavate so much was the design. Essentially, the geogrid had to go back about 15 feet, and that gets every three bags, so every 1.5 feet the whole way up the wall. So that's what really holds the wall in place. So this is a picture of them about 8 feet up, and essentially this is where the future high water mark is, so that's where the water will eventually rise at full summer pool. And that's kind of it finished. So we didn't want the bags exposed to the water, so they basically put a gravel layer on and then backfilled with all the riprap again. So this is 2 feet above high water mark now, so all the bags are fully protected. And then they just continued kind of building up. Oop, went back. Continue, so this is the full build out. So these bags won't be covered in riprap because they're not exposed to any water. But it does get covered with this jute matting for erosion control, which is also hydroseeded. So the seed will eventually work its way into the bags and provide a naturalized slope once again. So kind of next steps with this would just be basically paving and adding a railing along this section of the wall. Since it is sloped, we didn't want anyone in a wheelchair to kind of go over the edge, so that'll be all railed. And the last area of erosion control was down at the nose of the bay. So again, some pictures kind of all the washout, the exposed tree roots. Kind of back in here, it's pretty much hollow under all those. And same on the other side here. So this was a similar treatment to the other areas, but with some smaller rock and the dirty fill. Just kind of looking at how that filled in. And obviously, this is an access point for swimming, so the riprap's not really a great walking surface, so we did add these natural steps down into the water in a different color. So this is granite, so kind of distinguish where people are meant to go into the water. And this is a picture a couple weeks ago with the water pretty much at summer pool, so they can still kind of see where they're at. And again, when the future boardwalk goes in, that'll kind of be a little more clear as well. So that was basically all the erosion control that's taken place, and that is now complete. So they moved up to the hillside, regrading the hill and the lawn. So this is an existing picture where we have this concrete retaining block wall that's since been removed and regraded. Still a little bit of slope there, so kind of they'll end up placing boulders and working their way down that hill. And as I mentioned, there were some drainage issues, so the whole site's now drained and to this pipe, which is also drained to another little swale area. So that should take care of all that. The lawn was oftentimes very soggy. There's a few pictures of them placing the boulders along the hill, and kind of a completed picture here. It's hard to tell with the shadows, but that's been all done. This large one right here is a boulder hut. So we have 2 boulder huts, and those will eventually be kind of framed in with the future playground that was designed in the master plan. And so that's basically what they've done to date. Currently, they are starting work on the shelter. So those footings were dug and poured this morning. Next steps will be kind of getting the fabricators out here. That's a fully custom shelter, so they'll be kind of working on site, fabricating that. And then once that's complete, they'll finish out the lawn area, seeding it, planting, pouring all the hardscapes, the concrete, etc. So this whole upper area will be complete at that point. And then they'll move down to finish the beach, which will be a few hardscaping items, some site furnishings, and then kind of work their way out, lastly paving that trail so they're not running any equipment over it, and then installing that railing. And then finally, the boardwalk construction will be last. So project delays, we haven't had too many, just a couple. So the first one was when they were building this wall. At the time, it was kind of when Avista was doing their drilling work on the dam, so they ended up raising the water, and that kind of threw us off guard. So we couldn't really build the wall when it was underwater, so we had to wait until that went back down, along with just our kind of odd winter year where the flows were coming in a little sooner. So it pushed us back about 2 weeks, but ultimately they were able to get it in complete, and obviously you've seen the pictures of the finished product. And then the last one is the boardwalk. So early on in the project, Stancraft, which is pictured here, is a subcontractor to Big Sky. They went out and did some additional test piling. So in our design, we had a few test pilings, just kind of poking around where all the design was going to be. Stancraft wanted to go out and do a little bit more. There are over 40 piles kind of in the design, so they wanted to get a little better idea of a lot of the different spots. And so with them doing that, they came back with a few alternates on how they'd kind of like to see the design based on their experience and how they want to build it. And so that's what we've kind of been working through. And that basically pushed us out of their low water window when they wanted to build it for this past spring. And so now we're looking at building that in the next low water window, which would be this winter. So really, it shouldn't have an effect on the park users because the rest of the park will be finished by August, and essentially we'll just stop the contract with Big Sky and then take it back up in July, and then Stancraft will be able to finish in about 2 months, so they'll be out of there in March, and really the park's not even open at that point. So that's kind of where we're at. Do you have any questions?
It's great to see the progress. That was a long time in coming. I remember the discussions we had on the design of that park 10, 12 years ago, probably. So it's good to see that coming along. So that's good information.
Yeah, it's gone fairly smooth other than those couple delays, but overall pretty happy with how it's going.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. And next up, mayor and council comments. 2 comments. Rob, thank you for the crosswalk on Willamette and Chase. We talked last fall. I had someone that lived in that area asked me about a crosswalk right across from the school there, and it was wrong time of year, and I noticed that it's painted. So thank you very much for that. And then Dave, I had ran into a gentleman the other day that wanted me to pass on his appreciation for the trails at Community Forest. He said whoever, I'm not going to tell you that. Yeah, no, he said whoever is working on that deserves a raise. But he was very pleased with those trails. So I know you guys have worked hard, and Preston and all the work that's being done over there. So I just wanted to share that with both of you. Thank you. Any comments?
On the topic of the community forest, thank you for your staff that went out on Saturday to do that, like volunteer day. It was really great, really fun, and we got some stuff built in the community forest, and some local trailmen, trail life trailmen were out there helping out as well. So it was really lovely to be a part of, and I hope for more. So. They did, even with like 20, middle school boys. We did it.
We do need an executive session.
I move to enter an executive session pursuant to Idaho Code, where are we? Doesn't really say, it just says F, to communicate with legal counsel for a public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated. Further, that no action will be taken during the session. The session will last approximately 10 minutes.
Second.
Motion second. Do we need to, or you'll insert the appropriate Idaho code number?
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Any questions? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Malloy. Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Motion passed. Thank you. We'll enter executive. Call the meeting back to order. Are there any motions to come forward?
Adjourn. Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.